dir noch angesäche, so bist du ihr aller Ehre. Was ist Wundes hier geschäche? Dass ein Magd ein Kind gebar, ihre über aller Engel Schar. Was das nicht ein Wunder gab.
This is The New Right, a podcast for the lost arts, reclaiming the literary holy land from the heathen. This is Matt Pegas.
And this is Dan Baltic.
And we are here today with a guest that I think Dan as well, we've both been wanting to bring on for a long, long time, Brendan Luso. I would say formerly known as Gorgonzola Man, but I feel like maybe that's a dated reference at this point. I first came to know you online as Gorgonzola Man, but you've been Brendan Luso for 2-3 years now, right?
Well, yeah. Well, I'm Luso Brendan. It's just a reference to my my Lusophone heritage. I'm Portuguese,
right?
But my name is Brendan Macaulay. You can call me that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
a fellow Irishman here.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well,
Brendan, just let me interrupt you.
Absolutely.
Thank you guys for having me on.
Oh, no,
this is a
thank
pleasure
you for coming on.
I am a big fan of what you guys do. I'm especially a big fan of these last couple of episodes. You've had some guys that I really respect a lot who are my colleagues at Apocalypse Confidential. And so,
it's kind of an unplanned thing, but I think it kind of cool in a way that you're our third guest in a row that's affiliated with Apocalypse Confidential. It wasn't planned that we were going to start 2023 off by doing an intensive investigation of the Apocalypse Confidential scene. However, things were, perhaps not everything happens for a reason. Perhaps there's some hidden meaning to this. I don't know, but Brendan is for anyone who doesn't know, Brendan is a longtime podcaster, kind of a fixture in what. I hate these labels and whatever, but the weird right scene that we kind of talked about in our last episode with Jacob, Brendan is kind of almost like a founding member of or a very deep-seated figurehead within. He is the host of Tales from the Mall. He is a frequent, as Dan has described himself, a frequent contributor to Twitter.com, a poster and a podcaster, and someone who has his hand in a lot of different things. I definitely first came across you through the many wonderful Perfume Nationalist guest appearances that you've made, co-host appearances that you've made, but you've been doing a lot of work. And one of the main things that we're going to talk about today is how would you describe it? A radio drama? I mean, it's not radio, it's a podcast drama, The Isolation Chamber, which I'm not just saying this because we listen to it and want to support our guests, but it is fantastic. It is a
absolutely
work of literature, every bit as much as the books we cover, and everyone should check it out. It's about 12 episodes. You'll get into it fast, and we'll talk more about it. But Brendan is all
so much.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't shy from the term radio drama. In fact, I think I was calling it an audio drama for a while, but to me that just sounded like when you refer to your girlfriend as your partner.
Yeah,
I hear you. Yeah.
I mean, it's just straight up radio drama. It happens to be available on a podcast, but I mean, it's just an old school radio drama. So
absolutely. And that's the aesthetic of it. I think it's important. Well, I think it's good to call it a radio drama because it gives you some idea of the genre. If you're calling it an audio drama or a podcast drama, your head starts to go elsewhere. But this is very much within that radio drama genre. I remember growing up, I actually used to listen to the radio before I had the internet, and I would occasionally be like skimming around, probably the AM dial, but sometimes the FM dial, and every once in a while, not that radio dramas, I'm a millennial, not that they were like a huge part of my childhood, but every so often you'd come across something that sounded a little bit like a little bit like the isolation chamber. And the isolation chamber is a bit trippy, as we'll get into. There's some very sort of psychedelic and random aspects to it in a wonderful way. But what's interesting is I remember the kind of the aesthetic of that. Like it's sometimes, and I do mean this in a positive way. Like sometimes when you as a kid, when I would come across those like weird AM radio type things, it would feel like the isolation chamber. It would have that sort of random psychedelic element because you're hopping into a story midway. And I just remember just thinking like, what the fuck is this? Like I listened to that as a kid, and the isolation chamber, I think does that to you too, but in a more intentional way, where there's a surreal element to it. And all that is to say, radio drama, I think, gives some idea of what this is.
Well, radio storytelling is often referred to as the theater of the mind.
Yeah,
and that's a psychedelic phrase. It's kind of unavoidable when
right.
when you're trying to create images with sound, and so that was something that I wanted to embrace. The whole idea of it taking place in a sense, of portions of it taking place in a sensory deprivation tank are actually inspired by this kind of a psychedelic film that I really like called Altered States.
Oh, I've heard of that.
Which is about a researcher who begins investigating sensory deprivation, and then he comes across this kind of ayahuasca like substance while he's doing some research in like Central America or Mexico or something like that. And then he starts injecting himself with that drug and going in the sensory deprivation tank. And then it kind of turns him into a and then it kind of turns into like a werewolf story after that, because because the drug is altering him at like a genetic level.
So oh, sorry, go on.
And so, I am somebody who has used the sensory deprivation tank as a way to actually relax and unplug, and have not had many visionary experience. It's not a psychedelic thing when I do it. Some people say that they have visions and stuff like that. But it is like a way of I feel like the isolation chamber is a metaphor for a lot of different things. What we experienced as people when we were in our lonely apartments during COVID, but also the mindset that we have to enter in order to become more creative, to do the creative work that we do.
Absolutely. And so, to be clear, you actually have been in an isolation chamber. This is a medicinal or whatever practice that you occasionally do.
Dozens of times. Yeah.
Interesting.
There's a place here in Tempe, and they call it a float spa because you basically get in what looks like a little spaceship, and you lie down in salt water, because so you float on top of salt water in darkness, and for an hour or two if you want, and basically it just takes all the pressure off of your body. Because you don't have any stimulus, it takes pressure off of your eyes and mind, and you kind of enter this like relaxed state, and it's good for your back. All your athletes use it to recover from stress and strain, but people also use it just for like meditation and visualization and things. It's something that Joe Rogan has talked a lot about.
Oh yeah.
And I think he probably has one at his house, and he probably like gets high as fuck and goes in there and practices jujitsu moves.
Fire up the isolation chamber.
Yeah. And he like practices jujitsu moves in his mind or whatever. But it's really at its base level, it's just a way of relaxing. It's just a meditation.
Okay. It to me had some real corollaries to as you describe it. He starts to hallucinate, and he starts to in part aided by pills that he's given, and we'll get into this more later. But it has psychedelic elements, these isolation chamber trips. And for me, there is a real corollary to psychedelic trips that I have had, and it felt very very similar. But we'll get into that more later. I noticed in the notes that you did want to kind of foreground Tales from the Mall a bit. Maybe we kind of like shift gears, hit Tales from the Mall, and then get more deeply into Isolation Chamber.
I think that's a wise idea, just because I don't want to, Tales from the Mall is where, Daddy makes the big bucks,
Exactly.
and so
Yeah.
I don't want that to get lost in the shuffle.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
Isolation Chamber is free for all to listen to and enjoy, and I agree there's a lot to explore. Tales from the Mall is a talk show that I have done for well over a year now, and you can subscribe to it on patreon.com/tales from the mall, and there's an archive of like 90 different episodes with some really amazing people that your
Absolutely.
listeners would be familiar with, people
Yeah,
that you've had on your show, like Howling Mutant has been on a number of times, and guys like Delicious Tacos,
Oh, I
Sam
didn't know
Pink.
Tacos was on. That's cool.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sam Pink. More recently, we've had some, and I've had the whole Apocalypse Confidential crew on there. Recently, I had Tom Will. He's our poetry editor on there,
One of
all
his
new
only
episodes.
pod appearances, from what I know, because we invited him on
Yeah.
New Right, and he says he doesn't do pods. I believe him, but I think
Well,
you brought him out of his shell there.
well, I only had to beg him 100 times, but yeah, all new episodes now are subscribers only. So if you go to
Gotcha.
patreon.com/tales from the mall, what you're getting is a recorded phone conversation where I'm at the mall walking around and talking to some of these, like, anything from creative people who are writers and artists to e-girls to random friends of mine. So it's kind of
No, I've listened to a chunk of it. I would like to do the Jack from the Perfume Nationalist thing of actually listening to all of it. But I think I've heard maybe the first dozen or so episodes, and I should catch up. It's a great podcast. It's a great concept. Not to be this guy, but me and Dan should come on sometime, perhaps. Even.
Yeah, no, we'd
throw it
love
out
to,
there.
to invite ourselves on, but
not
yeah.
to invite ourselves on, but I've long been a fan, as I'm trying to say it. I think it's a great pod. Yeah,
I would love to have you guys on. In fact, the whole idea that I have is that sometimes you go on some of these podcasts and like the idea is to like talk about David Cronenberg for 3 hours or whatever, which is great. But I wanted to give people an opportunity to talk about themselves or whatever they wanted to talk about, and that it's like kind of like for the guests,
Yeah, well, that's one of the things I really like about your work, is I think that you're just in general, like definitely Tales from the Mall, Isolation Chamber in a different way, even your Twitter presence, you seem to be, it's kind of this weird, quote unquote, weird, right, thing we talked about with Jacob. Like, it's not about politics. It's not even about like art in an official sense. It's very much like about, it's hard to say this without sounding, kind of like a
vibes by any chance,
vibes and self-expression, in a very real sense of like, being vulnerable, but just like really showing people what you're all about, which in an anonymous Twitter ecosphere, which I'm not against, people to choose their own levels of anonymity, but I think that's one of the things that makes your work really stand out is it really foregrounds that element of vulnerability, and not just vulnerability in like an emo way, but like vulnerability in like making art out of this kind of way. It's something that you embody, but also bring out of your guests for sure.
Well, it's interesting that you use that word vulnerability, because I think about it that way as well. And it's funny because, I think that I suspect strongly that a lot of people have doubts and reservations about their worth, about what they're capable of, about if anybody even fucking cares if they have anything to say.
Mm-hmm.
We exist in an age where there's like a cacophony of voices and projects and things like that. And I just want to open myself up and say, hey, look, I have sometimes I feel inadequate. Sometimes I have doubts, etc. But then people will come back and say, like, this guy is neurotic. He's insecure. And I say, well, hey, look, I admitted to those things. That doesn't mean that I'm especially that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think so.
People
Yeah.
take advantage of that. It's like, well, maybe you should open up, yourself to anybody who has ears to listen.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
And I mean, that was one of my takeaways from, I mean, we'll talk about it more, Isolation Chamber. But like, I mean, yes, it is to some extent a work of fiction. But I mean, like there is a protagonist named Brendan, and you do kind of like go into these kind of like very, and yes, I'm sure some of it is fiction, but personal things regarding self-worth, self-doubt, and frankly, maybe I even catch flack for this, but I think on our side of the internet, especially the more frog Twitter like side,
Yeah.
there's a kind of real like hard nose, like we're men, we don't talk about our feelings, we don't. And, but I mean, the truth, and there is something to be said for that. There's, of course, being stoic and what have you. But I mean, it's not like we don't have feelings. We don't have these, and it can be enlightening and fun to talk about sometimes, and necessary, I suppose.
And necessary, yeah, it's necessary to sometimes talk about this stuff before becoming stoic, quote unquote.
Well,
Yeah.
I guess I would ask. Here's what the question that I would ask, to paraphrase Langston Hughes, is what happens. He asked, what happens to a dream deferred? I would ask, well, what happens to an insecurity deferred? Does it?
Yeah.
And then he says, what does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or does it explode? And I think that if you don't have somewhere to put that shit, you're gonna act like a psycho. That, by the way, the protagonist of your book, Dan Nutcracker, who, by the way, you encapsulate so many different strains of thought that are going through his head. I feel like there's a lot. He's experiencing a confusion of influences. But the poor bastard, he ends up spontaneously crying on like 4 different occasions or something like that. That could very well, I think that there's a strength and courage to just kind of announce who you are, at the very least announce who you are,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's like as you say, an insecurity that is deferred it doesn't necessarily explode. It can, but like the way I would think of it is it kind of like hardens. And so it's like there's a rock in your shoe and you kind of like walk with a limp because of it, or you kind of like try to work around it. And, sometimes there's some things that you obviously will have to work around. And like Spencer, yeah, there's some issues that like he will, if he were psychologically healthy, he would be acknowledging and trying to work around. But if you don't even like really know that they're there and you just try to put them out of your mind, your whole personality will be formed around kind of mitigating them. And that's, very often not a fun person to be around.
I would have to agree. Yeah. I used to have this basketball coach when I was a kid. And he was the dad of one of the kids who were also on the team. Mm. And my God, the guy seemed like he was going to have a heart attack. And I think that the issue was for him was that he didn't have a lot of control over what happened in his life. And so when our absolutely atrocious YMCA basketball team would play, he would just let out all of his frustration then and there. And his face would turn all red. And, I think, he thought he might've been, I think he thought he was like Mike Ditka, but I don't know. You just made me think of that.
I had a coach like that, a basketball coach like that as a kid too. Not that it's that remarkable, but yeah, no, it's funny you bring that up. Because I was just thinking about that yesterday, because I've been thinking a lot about, and we'll get more into this on the Isolation Chamber. I've been thinking, I meditate. I think we all need like practices to sort of relax. And I've been thinking about that, like how I should probably have more of those in my life. And for some reason, it's just kind of funny that you brought this up, because for some reason I was thinking about like my coach when I was like 9. Again, father of one of the kids on the team, and I remember him just like blowing his top at like a bunch of 9-year-olds. And I was thinking, what was going on in his life? Like, why would he do that? But basically, I had the exact same experience as you. I think there are men, who like don't have an outlet. More so men than women, I imagine, who don't like have an outlet to express that frustration. It ends up coming out in weird ways, like as you said, what happens to I guess an insecurity deferred, or like or any negative emotion deferred, and it'll come out in bad ways. Yeah, I can't imagine screaming at like my 9-year-old kid on the weekend that I'm trying to coach his basketball. But yeah, it was like a thing. I don't know, weird.
Yeah, I hope that doesn't happen to me. I do like sports. Yeah. I do like sports a lot.
That's good. Yeah.
What kind of meditation do you do?
I hate to even be this guy, but I do transcendental meditation. No, I don't hate to be that guy. But yes, I do like the David Lynch TM.
So you do there's a Sanskrit mantra that you're repeating.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead, ask. Yeah, I'm curious.
I tried doing transcendental meditation. I thought it was very useful, but I was very uncomfortable with the Sanskrit mantra.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are, but it feels unnatural and organic.
Well, I just thought, well, what am I like?
Oh yeah.
I'm a Christian, okay,
yeah.
and so I didn't want to like step out on my God, so
yeah.
I was a little worried about that, but
Kali or something, yeah.
But I also, the thing is that I think the Maharishi was a little bit cagey about. He was like, "Oh, you got to do the Sanskrit mantra. It's just a way of using a phrase that has no meaning to you,
right?
But it's not doing, it doesn't have any religious connotations, and I think that was a way of attracting secular followers.
Yeah. Oh, go on.
But I think that it's been said by like people who are more familiar with Vedic religion and Hinduism and stuff that it's like, well, actually, this refers to a Vedic deity, this mantra or whatever, which there's no problem with that. It's just that Maharishi. Some people I think were like, well, he's not telling the truth about what
this is a topic I could talk on. I don't know, maybe we will, because it's not irrelevant to the isolation chamber. It's something I've been thinking about a little bit. I wrote about transcendental meditation and David Lynch and some other topics on my Substack not too long ago. And in my next book, I will republish those essays. But it's something that I have been thinking about it. And what I say about TM, like it just kind of made sense as like a meditation practice for me to take up, because there's a simplicity to it. I didn't want to I didn't have like the time to like get involved with anything too much more intense than that, where you're like learning some intense meditation ritual. Like I like the simplicity of it. I like the practice of doing it 20 minutes twice a day. However, I'm not necessarily like a true believer in Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, who's the founder of TM, for those who don't know, or just a lot of the other kind of promises of the TM organization. I've never had like a truly like psychedelic trip type. Well, maybe that's overstating it, but some people really say like, I do this and it's like the isolation chamber. Like I visualize, I complete, like it's like not ego death, but like approaching that, including David Lynch, who I respect and admire a lot. I think it has different effects on different people. For me, I keep doing it because it is just a convenient practice. And I do think it's benefited me. But I'm not like a true proselytizer, so to speak. As to the issue of the Vedic, the possibly religious element, I've heard that too. I haven't looked into it too much. Doesn't scare me too much, but I think you're right that there could be, with the figure of Maharishi himself, there could be some dissembling. People have accused him of being a fraud in other ways too. Including John Lennon, which
the Beatles. Well, yeah. Well, that song "Sexy Sadie," what have you done?
Yeah.
You made a fool of everyone. The original lyrics were Maharishi, what have you done?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it's true.
I had a girlfriend whose parents were evangelical Christians, and they met because they were both TMers, and in fact, her mom had gone to the Maharishi University in Iowa as her college.
Oh, wow.
and then they renounced TM and became evangelical Christians, born again Christians. As for David, okay, but I will say this, and I'm somebody who's practiced mindfulness, like studied mindfulness,
Yeah.
which is hard as hell, and not.
Well, that's what I do, by the way. I do mindfulness only 5 minutes a day, but yeah.
I think that mindfulness can be somewhat, it's a discipline.
Yeah.
And mantra meditation puts you in a relaxed state. You just kind of just gotta hum that little mantra in your head, and the rest does the work. You relax your body and mind. I found it much easier. Mindfulness, I got my mind expanded more, I think, at times, after, but you'd have to do a 30-minute meditation, because I mean, to you got so much shit stirring around in there. The atmosphere of your consciousness, you become aware of how much is going on when you do mindfulness.
Yeah, I should try mindfulness perhaps.
The end of it.
Yeah, go on, Dan.
Toward, as you do kind of like mindfully, you're trying to not explicitly not think of any thoughts and just feel, or whatever, however you do it. Like I think of like try to focus on my breathing. And I find that as time goes on, like you learn that it's not about banishing all thought from your head. It's about kind of learning to let those thoughts kind of glide over your consciousness and not engage with them. So like, it's only 5 minutes every morning, but toward the end of that 5 minutes, I'm just conscious of the fact that like I'm primarily paying attention to my breathing, but secondarily, there's like thoughts that are kind of like passing through, but like almost like images, not really. And like I find it's very useful, or it has been a very useful practice for me to understand that you can disengage from the kind of constant chasing of thoughts and of desires and thinking processes.
Yes.
No, definitely. In theory, with TM too, there's an element of that where you're not supposed to chase your thoughts away at all. You're just supposed to kind of acknowledge them and not give them as much power, so to speak. But yeah, no, it's an interesting topic. I think that, as you said, Brendan, like I think that the best thing I'll say about TM is the ease of it. It's something that you can easily get into a practice of doing. Because like for me, other habits like that, it's like I'm not gonna get in the habit if it's too hard. Like it's just not gonna happen. So
100%. And I just want to make it very clear that I'm not busting your balls for doing TM in any way.
No. I know. I realize that. I know. No, my relationship with I'm not like, again, I'm not like one of those true proselytizer types. It's something I kind of more just exploring. Just to comment, one last comment on the Maharishi Beatles thing to me is, I don't know, just very interesting. And then that I get all weird and esoteric about this, but like the fact that they made that song, Sexy Sadie, which was Maharishi, and then George Harrison requested that John Lennon change it. And then one of the Manson girls like named herself after that song. Like to me, that's like, whoa, like what's going on there? Like you talk about, I don't think there's anything evil going on or anything, but like it's kind of interesting to me that it had that spiritual source, and then there was that renunciation of that, and then it had that weird effect. Anyway, I'm writing not to grift here, not grift, but not this. I'm writing a new book, as some of followers of this pod know, and I write a little bit about. I read a good amount about meditation, and I even write a little bit about this Beatles Maharishi thing, because I think it's
interesting.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to reading that chapter.
Yeah,
it's a very good book Matt's writing.
Well, what the hell happened there? I mean, like, what was their issue with?
Allegedly, Maharishi had made some kind of sexual advance on Mia Farrow, of all people, who was also at the ashram.
Hey, who didn't,
What's that?
I said, who didn't?
Right, exactly. And John Lennon was like, oh, if he's so enlightened, like, why is he, like, horny?
That's think I'm
not an expert on it.
That's a fair question.
Like that.
You read about this, you can read about this with various gurus from various traditions.
A lot of them are perverts. There's no doubt.
It's like they have like these sex things, and I mean, it's just hard. I find that if you are trying to experience spirituality and get rid of your Buddhism or whatever, they make refer to them as like attachments or
Mhm.
whatever. Like lust is the hardest to overcome.
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I mean, that has been my biggest obstacle to experiencing religion is
Yeah.
trying to be moral, sexually.
Yeah. Well, Christ, I can imagine. Yeah. I mean, for me too, in a way, like, yeah, it's definitely the most, especially, well, pornography and all that's another topic, but it's so pervasive online, obviously. It's very hard to be kind of continent with regard to that. But in terms of the Maharishi Beatles thing, yeah, I mean, I'm sure there's someone who's written about it more extensively. I do know, in defense of TM and Maharishi, George Harrison, maybe Ringo, and definitely Paul McCartney have also all sort of like um reconciled with him later and maybe became friends again. And I think Paul McCartney like still does TM, so it's not a totally negative review from the Beatles. But the John Lennon thing is interesting because I think he was reacting against the sort of sexuality thing, but also this is kind of apropos of nothing, but it's just something I've been thinking about, and maybe it's not completely unrelated to the themes of Isolation Chamber, etc. This is later. If you've heard the song "God" by John Lennon, where he's like talking about all the
Yes.
things he doesn't believe in, he's also, I just think, very much like that became his thing in like the 70s, is that he rejected pretty much all spiritualism, um, which I don't agree with. I'm not. I once almost tweeted like I believe in everything that John Lennon says he doesn't believe in the song God, which, as people know, in case
So you do
some
believe in the
choice.
Beatles?
I suppose so, but also Elvis, and I won't even
Yeah.
name Elvis. Anyway, not to go on a tangent, but yeah, it's just
No,
interesting to me that I think he had that like atheistic experience of it and rejected it. And I can understand coming up through the 60s and just saying screw all this. It's just me and my wife, which is essentially what he ended up saying. But yeah.
well, I think from where he was sitting or whatever, like so many things were coming at him, and I mean, I can understand him like wanting to just kind of like get a clear head. Sometimes you have to reject a
Exactly.
lot of shit just to get a clear head, and like and I have to do this 100 times a day where I'm just like fuck everything. But
Yeah.
um I was recently watching the because I'm ultimate, I said I was a Christian. I'm also like, I've been like a new ager. I've loved studying like chakras and
Yeah. Yeah.
crystals and fucking, hypnosis and just like everything you can think of. Tarot, like all that stuff.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
And um but and plus, like different like psychology. I had a relationship with LSD, all these things. I was watching this Aaron Rodgers interview because Aaron Rodgers is in the
Yeah.
news, and he's kind of ahead, and he likes new age shit, and he's kind of like a based hippie or whatever.
Yeah.
And he was doing an interview with this guy Aubrey Marcus, who's kind of like, I, I call him a Joe Rogan wannabe, but he may be actually like the puppet master of Joe Rogan, even,
Yeah.
like, and he was talking about going on the darkness retreat, and they talk about ayahuasca, and something was irritating me about it, even though I'm like, like kind of a fan of that stuff and Aaron
Yeah.
Rodgers in particular. And I thought, what irritates me about this is that it's not that they're talking about all of these things to embrace the self better,
Yeah. Oh,
detached from a
absolutely.
higher
Yeah.
power. And it seems really like, at worst, narcissistic. I know that's a term that we use a lot. Um, but just kind of selfish. And so
Oh yeah, definitely. That is
it,
the
it kind of
key
made me
pitfall.
rethink my relationship with some of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
I mean, there's with psychedelics, there's definitely the kind of like drive to be like, I'm gonna try them all, and I'm gonna maybe this one will help me more in this way, and that one will help me more in that way, and it becomes this sort of thing where you're like trying to, maximize your enlightenment, which is of course not the end. Like I know people approach meditation this way too, and they excoriate themselves for it, rightly so. It's not about like I'm gonna be the most enlightened person. It's like you can't do ego death without giving up a bit of your ego, and that is very much the point with a number of these psychedelic experiences. At least it was for me. I don't know about you, Brendan.
Well, I mean, I experienced ego death, and it was just like a very traumatic. Like a I talk about this a lot on my show, but like I had an experience with LSD that just basically changed my life in a bad at first a bad way, where it was just like really I kind of just had a nervous breakdown.
Yeah.
And I was not the same after that. And I don't know why, why I experienced it that way, and other people kind of come out on the other side. Like maybe my ego is so resistant to it that it had its defenses were to be scared and all that stuff. But I think when you're talking about enlightenment and all of these things that they do, it's really just at its core, it's just like I want to feel good. I want to feel better. I want to feel bliss. They use the term bliss, which has these kinds of like spiritual trappings, but really what you're talking about is unending pleasure and no pain. It's really not that complicated or high-minded, I would argue. Which by the way, there's nothing wrong with wanting.
No, but
suffering is painful.
Pitfalls. Yeah. It's pitfall. This is actually a really interesting topic, and it's going to be. I think it'll lead us into discussing the isolation chamber more, more deeply. I think that definitely the pitfalls you kind of describe of New Age thought and practices with meditation and even things like tarot and perhaps psychedelic drug use as all. Those are all very real pitfalls. I'm also into like a lot of New Age stuff in that kind of hopefully more based way, but it's stuff that I've been exploring a lot, especially over the past like year and a half. But I've always been very conscious, and I'm not saying I haven't fucked up, but I've always been kind of very cautious about the degree to which it is extremely selfish. It is like part of like me, like not me too, but me culture, so to speak, where you're the me generation type of thing from the 60s and 70s. It's very much in line with that. And the danger from a theological or spiritual perspective, the danger of it is making yourself into a god, or at least like a pope. Like you're the only authority that you're appealing to. I think that's both the appeal of those practices, but also one of the severe dangers. I do think it can be mitigated, and I do think some of these practices can still have a lot of value outside of it, but that is the principal pitfall, I think, is the fact that this is all part of individualism. And the strength of organized religion is that precisely that it is not. Like there's pitfalls to organized religion too, no doubt. I don't like defend every organized religion. Like there's something good about the freedom of New Age stuff. But like at the end of the day, if that's all you're doing, like you could kind of devolve into a narcissistic wormhole. Sorry for being long-winded here. The other thing I'll say is like the other element that actually has never sit well with me, especially with things like TM and certain with meditation and sort of more Eastern tinged Western appropriations of Eastern thought in general, is that ostensible desire for like unending bliss. I understand, as you said, I understand why people want that. And I'm not necessarily like morally castigating wanting that. But that actually has never sit well with me. Like, I don't want that. Like, I actually want to be embodied. Ego death, I think, can be valuable, but I want, like, I take a lot of meaning in my suffering, I guess. I don't actually want my suffering.
Yes. That's a great point. I think that Christianity has suffering is built into the narrative, and that's important because it's unavoidable. But I think that we also, you guys wrote books, so you crave suffering. It's a big part of who we are, and where meaning comes from.
Absolutely.
We hold the light.
Point.
Yeah.
All of us
hold the light. Yeah. No, I mean that I really like, so to finish the point and to go along with what you're saying, Brandon, like I really do like a lot of sort of Buddhist or even Hindu inflected practices. I think they're like the most serious study of like the renunciation of will that the world has had. And I think there's a lot of value in sort of suspending the will. But for me, it can't be the be all end all. Like just it being in that state of bliss doesn't no, like meaning comes from suffering. I think that the value in the New Age stuff, in the Eastern stuff, a lot of it is for me. I think like they can be used as tools to sort of improve the mind, so to speak. But ultimately, not the be all end all in terms of suspending that stuff. And to make the final point, I think that a lot of them are chiefly beneficial in as far as they kind of benefit the creative process. I think even things like tarot for me, or like meditation to a certain extent. That's why I got into it through David Lynch. It's like, oh, I'm going to take the strength of this and then I'm going to put it into something that is material, that is within this realm, and put it out in the world. And I think that is a good bridge to talk about the isolation chamber. But yeah.
Well, the isolation chamber is not so. You talk about David Lynch, okay? I feel like the isolation chamber has that kind of like untethered quality that a lot of David Lynch's work has. And thinking about David Lynch gave me permission to not worry about structure and always making sense and those kinds of things. But I realized when I made the isolation chamber, and by the way, I wrote the first episode and recorded it without knowing anything about what was going to happen afterwards.
And that was sense. Yeah.
That was exactly what happened with every episode subsequent. Okay, so
I kind of thought that
it's like, oh, now I got to write a new one, and something's got to kind of connect to that previous one, and
that's more or less how I wrote Nutcracker.
And it just kept going and going and going.
You go where the muse takes you.
Yeah,
and then the muse is kind of like we all have access to that, and David Lynch has kind of like found a really good way to do it with TM. Like he thinks that's you get into creative states where you're kind of operating with something that's coming from outside of you, but he doesn't do the work of laying a heavy structure down on those visions when he gets them. You know what I mean? Like if you watch some of his greatest stuff, like Lost Highway or Mulholland Drive. But then you get into something like Inland Empire, which I'm sorry, folks, like it just doesn't work for me. Like it doesn't make sense. Like it's completely untethered. And I worked on the isolation chamber in that kind of mode, trying to lay down some narrative structure, trying to make sense of what, basically, I think for me, it kind of operated as like more the isolation chamber. You can look at it as like a sketchbook or something like that, where I'm putting everything in there. I'm putting everything I got in there, all the ideas, all the things but I've really come to respect the artist who thinks about the structure of the work. That's where when you watch a good Hollywood movie that works, one that I'm thinking of in particular is like Fatal Attraction. This great narrative, just like hits all the beats. Like the viewer is on the edge of their seat and wondering what's going to happen next, and it all adds up. That part to make it work like that. That's hard fucking work. And so, in future fictional endeavors that I work on, I will not skimp on that, and I think about that a lot. Is narrative structure?
Yeah,
I would push back on that slightly by saying that I think the kind of free-flowing dynamic that you have on the isolation chamber is a real boost and benefit to it, because you can kind of sense the kind of on-the-fly creativity that is, it's kind of infectious. And when I was planning Nutcracker, and when I've tried to plan novels and screenplays in the past, with screenplays you kind of do need to plan it. It's a movie; it has to fit into a certain framework. Yeah. but like novels or even a more open-ended kind of radio drama, I feel like those will benefit from fidelity to character voice. So like your character voice is Brendan basically, and other characters too. But like at no point did I feel like that the isolation chamber was really kind of like veering in a direction to satisfy narrative and untrue to the characters. Like by the end, when Brendan is the world's best performance artist and he's become like a dick, like I believe that turn. I like not that I believe you, Brendan, are a dick, but I believe that turn in the radio drama. And yeah, it fidelity to your like your voice and your vision is kind of one of the big kind of benefits to not overly structuring a work of fiction, so you can kind of keep it real throughout the process.
Yeah,
sure. That's a good point. I mean, that's something I hadn't thought about, but like I'm working on something right now where I've got a lot of the story planned out, and I'm having trouble making the characters sing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the two things are kind of in conflict sometimes, I think. Dan, continue. Sorry.
In that instance, I think what you really need to do is just like listen to the characters. Like I think it's like you want to plan, but you want to ultimately like have the character have final authority. So like you make plans, but you have it like written into the contract that at the end of the day, the character says what's going to happen. And so like if you have them like, it's like, oh, at this point, Spencer marries Crystal. Like it's not just, you're there and you're just like, that's not going to happen. And you just have to, you have to roll with it and let the character take you where character wants to go.
And that's in my opinion the discovery that comes from letting the character do the writing, do the talking, do the guiding you. That's like the best feeling. That's the best feeling. That's better than that's kind of like what you're trying to get when you do, when you get into like deep states of meditation or doing
absolutely, it is
where something's coming from outside of you in.
Yeah, you're in the zone.
I love that feeling.
Like athletes when they're like in the middle of like one of their best basketball games or whatever, and they could see everything all around them, and they're just like moving fluidly. Like for nerdy writer guys, like writing like effortlessly, hearing the that's like our being in the zone, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that. Yeah, it's a flow state, and it's definitely kind of
flow state. That's what I was gonna say.
Yeah, seeking out of art, but as well as also things like meditation too. It's like that Nirvana feeling, not Nirvana the band, but you know what I mean. That bliss. Maybe that's maybe that's not to split hairs. I don't know if that's like actually how Nirvana would be defined in an Eastern tradition. Maybe that's a more calm state, and flow state's actually more active. I don't know. It's following the Tao. I don't know. There's a million different frameworks to put it in. It's all good. But I was gonna say, I think that art is often, especially writing, but I think all art would have something equivalent to this. The art itself is the art of balancing that kind of. It's not like Jordan Peterson, like chaos and order, so to speak. Like you have to impose that structure, but sometimes that's at odds with that more free-flowing creativity. But the free-flowing creativity doesn't always lend itself well to structure. And like a lot of art and a lot of the best art, some art leans too far in one direction or the other. You have like formulaic television, which is not exactly art, but it's very well plotted. And then you have like Inland Empire, which I might like a bit more than you, but I definitely hear what you're saying, where it's kind of just a chaotic, like surreal id. And then you have something like Mulholland Drive, not to sound film bro-y about that, but you know what I mean? So Mulholland, like, or even Blue Velvet, perhaps even in a more plotward direction, where there's that great balance between the two things. And I think that is the struggle. And it's not one that there's an easy solution for. It's something you have to work at and almost like get lucky to be able to enter that mental space where you can make something that is both channeling a pure fire of creativity and also structured. It's a challenge.
I think it's an extreme challenge, and I think that that when you say that you get lucky, I think that's true. I think that's true. I think if you can catch it a few times and be like, that's great. And luck is a component of greatness, and luck itself is an art. But I think just the thing that I will, not denigrating like unstructured, surreal narratives. I'm just saying that the hard work that comes from imposing structure on a work is a challenge that I hadn't previously considered and am embracing, as like a
I think
as something
absolutely. And that's what
as just like the and like I don't want to try the isolation chamber again, like and risk fate and risk and risk the gods turning on me.
I think it's good to kind of go in different directions. As Dan kind of said, I do think the freewheeling nature of the isolation chamber is one of the main appeals. And I have this comment, like I like the ending. I think the ending makes sense that Brendan, the character, would kind of it's a almost like this A Star Is Born type narrative where like the artistry, like he sells out, so to speak. Definitely a satisfying narrative, and it comes to a satisfying conclusion. But I would say, and please take this as a compliment, that if you would have kept doing the isolation chamber for years, like I probably, I would have obviously, I would have kept listening. Like I could imagine you going in just a zillion different directions. It would still be interesting because what you were doing was interesting. But that being said, I totally get the need to at some point bring the project to a close. And I also totally get what you're saying in terms of like once you do a more freewheeling thing, like you need to explore your craft more in terms of bringing structure to it. And whatever you produce next, and I'm curious to whatever extent you want to talk about that. Is it another radio drama? I don't know. Is it a book? But like I understand wanting to kind of swing in the other direction. On a personal level, like the first novel I wrote, Dragon Day, pretty well plotted. My next book, which is not a novel actually, but a series of like interrelated short stories and essays, is a lot more like unbridled. And I think it is kind of, as an artist, one does want to go back and forth and try sort of different things on.
Well, the good news is that I am doing another radio drama.
Great.
Awesome. Happy to hear it.
I'm plotting it a little bit more tight. I'm just to take the stress out of it. I'm writing all the episodes first and then going to record it, which, I mean, that the thing was that you'd I'd put out an isolation chamber episode and then it'd be like start all over again, And that was a little stressful. But the other thing is that there will be elements of it that are retained, which is the mystery, the mysterious esoteric atmosphere. I'm gonna try again.
Good.
True detective vibes here.
Yeah. That's a good way of looking at it, actually.
Season 2 was the best season. So
well, and
isolation chamber,
and not only that, but we're gonna get Black Irishman Colin Farrell for the.
I thought you were gonna say Black Irishman Howling Mutant.
Well, he's kind of the Colin Farrell of my.
Colin Farrell, I have to say, would exist very nicely within the Brendan Luso
expanded universe.
Yeah, totally.
I'm a fan.
I'm a big fan too. I saw like probably mutual friend or mutual Twitter follower at least. What's his name? Filthy Armenian really hated Banshees of Inisherin, and I kind of get why he did, but I do really like seeing Colin Farrell and everything.
Yeah, good acting, but I wasn't a huge fan.
But not to go on there. He has that vibe. He has that isolation chamber vibe about him.
I was upset about the Batman because he was unrecognizable. Like I was like,
oh right, I forgot about that.
As the Penguin of all people.
Yeah.
Which I can understand why. Everybody wants it. Now that Heath Ledger is like ascended to like God status, because of the Joker, like everybody wants a crack at a Batman villain and like will put on a fat suit or whatever. But I need but some actors are like, hey, get him in a fat suit or whatever. Bobby De Niro, like make him into a new guy. But other people have just like that raw appeal of just like who they are and how they look.
Yeah.
That's more of what Colin Farrell is. So
I agree.
Don't put him in a fat suit and give him a New York accent.
No, that was not. Yeah, I do like Paul Dano. I mean, maybe it's kind of Reddit or like a predictable opinion. Maybe everyone said this, but I thought Paul Dano was pretty striking in that movie.
Interesting.
But yeah, no, the Colin Farrell wasn't. Yeah, it's kind of forgettable, unfortunately.
Yeah. I mean, unfortunately, it wasn't like a great movie. It was like
it was good, but yeah,
it was good. It was good, but it was and it was like two movies in one, kind of.
Sort of, yeah.
But yeah, I was hoping I'm a big Batman person myself, and I just was like a little let down by that particular property.
Yeah.
One thing I want to say before I forget is that because we're talking about your next season of whether it's Isolation Chamber or a new project entirely, I was talking with my girlfriend last night and I described it as like a radio drama. And she was like, does that mean it's like a play that's recorded? And I said, well, actually kind of not, because like I have some background in the industry and or whatever. And as such, I listened to a good number of recorded plays. And like it's very difficult to if you're just kind of like reading a play that the actors are reading it, to envision what's going on the stage, because a lot of it relies upon movement. A lot of it, like all of these recorded plays, audio plays, are not written for the audio medium. So it kind of falls flat. It doesn't, in some instances, doesn't work at all. Whereas the Isolation Chamber and what you've done, frankly, that is, I haven't listened to a ton of like true radio dramas, but you nailed it. And it's just like, it's just very listenable, very like, I'm not struggling to picture what's going on, because through the combination of sound effects and like interior monologues and everything, it flows seamlessly. And so, yeah, kudos to you that, you've really nailed the radio drama. Yeah. And I can't wait to see the next one. Yeah. Theater of the Mind. Yes.
Well, there's two things that go into that. One is that when you're writing it, that you won't be showing anything. So you put things in the characters' mouths to describe the atmosphere. The other thing is that I relied on not one, but 3 different producers to make the soundscape. The first one is this guy, Eric Harris, who created the show. We kind of created the show together. In fact, he had come to me right about the time that I was about to do the Elroy Boys. And he said, hey man, I've heard you on these various shows, doing guest spots or whatever. And I think you should have your own show. And I was like, well, and he said, and he's a music producer and musician. And he said,
not the Columbine killer, just to be clear.
No, thankfully. You guys should be really worried about me if I was describing him, because I believe he, ate his own gun.
Yeah, you'd have to be a supernatural figure.
Yeah, an Isolation Chamber visitor, perhaps.
Exactly. Maybe he should have been.
Yeah, on that dark Isolation Chamber episode.
Yeah,
the other guy in the basement.
Oh man, I would love to talk about that. I would love to talk about that episode.
No, we want to get into it. That's
I have great affection for that. I think I love that episode so much, and I put a lot of myself into that one, episode 6.
Yeah, that was the favorite of mine. Just clear.
Yeah. And that one was done by Eric. The music and stuff was done by Eric. And he'd said, well, you should do your own show and I'll help you do it. I'll do anything, And I said, well, unfortunately you're catching me at a time where I'm already in development of this talk show, the Elroy Boys with Blauergeist and this guy, Sam Dennis, who also is on the Isolation Chamber. Yeah. And I said, but maybe we can try something different, something weird, something not a talk show. And that's how we started doing the Isolation Chamber. And he did the music in the audio stuff for the first, I believe it was like 8 or 9 episodes. He did the first 9, I believe, and then he kind of dropped off the project. And then I got my brother, who's a really talented musician, to do the next 2. And then and then the last 2 were done by John Dios, who was like kind of a controversial Twitter personality, but also a musician. And I think that he did it. All 3 of them did a fucking great job. I couldn't have done it without them.
Yeah.
And
excellent work.
Couldn't have done it without them. Couldn't have done it without all of the people that were on it, which, I mean, there's like too many to name, but
a lot of real talent. Like Mutant is like, I know that he has a great Twitter, presence. It's one of the funniest Twitter accounts out there, but he's a really good actor too. Like, he's hilarious. Like that line where he's just like, I'm gonna stick my hand up your wife's ass. It was just hilarious. It's there's so many like lines. Like, I thought that Mutant walked away with it many times.
Well, and on the very last episode, finally, my mom is played by this woman, Martina Martinez, who is she wrote the story for Terror House called Paco that's really good, and she was just on Tales from the Mall, which people should subscribe and listen to that. But and she was on it before.
I didn't realize that was her. That's
she's incredibly talented. Like, she just destroyed this part.
Oh yeah, she was great as your mom. And
so I'm writing a play for her, a real, like, I'm hoping a stage play that she can be in, and that will, so hopefully
she's a great actress. Yeah,
she's really talented, really, really good. But there were so many great people. I mean, there wasn't anyone that I would like, I just thought I some parts I wrote with people in mind, other people filled in the role and did an amazing job. And but that
you
episode
yourself were very good. Like, kind of like teasing out all of these kind of insecurities while like kind of still like maintaining a kind of likable stage presence. It was really good.
Well, and let me tell you something about. I finally, I started it in like February of 21, I think, is when the first episode came out, and the last episode just came out this year. And there was a significant delay between certain episodes. But I wanted to close the loop on it because many of the crazy shit that I write about in the isolation chamber, it like opened up a portal in my life where these crazy shit would happen to me. Not always good. And things that happen on the show would happen to me. And it happened to other people that were involved in the show. And it was like, I got to put the lid on this motherfucker, or else weird shit's going to keep happening. You know what I mean? Like,
that's wild.
Women coming to me and being like, I like you because you're uniquely sensitive and sweet. Women tricking me, like that art journalist Monica or whatever, tricks Brendan in episode 6. Relationships, friendships and things imploding, people dropping off, people who played characters acting out the things that happened to them between me and them on the show happened between me and them in real life.
Holy fuck.
I had to close the lid.
Like a tulpa. It's like the show had a power.
Had to close the lid.
Actually, I had on my one of my questions I wanted to ask was like, so how did you decide to bring the show to a close? And that is perhaps 3 or 4 times as satisfying an answer as I would have anticipated.
Well, and the other thing was that when Eric and I first were developing the show, we were like, we're going to do 13 episodes, like arbitrarily, kind of.
Yeah.
And so I stuck to that. Like, so that was another thing. But it was weird.
Definitely sounds weird. Without prying too much further into it, because I appreciate there's probably personal stuff that was basic. Because I was gonna ask, like, what was the, not in a negative way, but what was the deal with the timeline? It was like, what is it, 10 or 11 episodes all in 2021, maybe 2 last year and 1 this year. It's a very strange timeline, but I can appreciate if there was a intersection of life.
Well, one other thing is that Tales from the Mall took over my life.
Okay.
Yeah. And I mean, when I first started Tales from the Mall, I was putting out 2 episodes a week.
I remember you were very prolific.
And doing short film video promotions like that
Yeah, I
were
remember the
really
videos.
intensive. Like,
Oh yeah, video
yes.
editing is no picnic, and I imagine you did that yourself.
No, I had a guy. I had
Oh,
this
fun. I
amazing
hope it
video
went so.
editor. His name is Matt. He's like a genius. And then eventually, like, that was too much work. And so
Yeah,
I just started doing like little ambient videos to promote it, but I still stick with that. Still do a video for every episode.
yeah, it's
So,
dope. Yeah.
but before it was like there'd be these like really intricate mall vibes videos, or we'd tell a story, and there was a lot of acting and shooting and
Oh, I remember like your one with Sandra Solomon, Ubermensch, who was also on.
yeah.
No, sorry, was also on Isolation Chamber. I remember that video was like, wow, this is a quite intricately edited. There was one where you're not to, yeah, we'll talk more about Isolation Chamber, but
We
I
can
remember
talk
you were like
about whatever.
naked. You were naked in the desert. So
Yeah, yeah, I
yeah, that was
was.
a memorable. That was the one with Sandra, right?
Yeah, well, you know what? I went. My parents live in rural Arizona, and so I knew like just having gone hiking in that area and stuff. Like I knew where there were like little dirt patches on the side of the road where you could like park your car and like
Yeah.
get out and go into the desert off trail. And so I kind of knew of places where I could go be nude in the desert,
Oh
which was
yeah.
fortunate because I
That's
wouldn't want to
good to
be
know.
registered as a sex offender or
Okay, I
whatever.
actually have to clarify something about that. We could continue your story.
No,
I just
that's it.
there's a weird bit of internet of Twitter back and forth that I should clarify. My friend Robert Stark, who's probably on your radar, I remember at that time he left you a comment like, "Isn't this bad paperwork?" And you were like, "What's your meaning?" or something. I don't know. And I don't know if you thought he was being a dick or something. To clarify on behalf of Robert, Robert is like very obsessed with like the laws in Arizona pertaining to like I don't know. He has a weird fixation on like the possibility of like getting arrested on like a sex offender charge and like where the worst places in the country to have that happen to you are. And he has some idea that Arizona is one of the worst places. So just to clarify on Robert's behalf, I think that's what he was getting at, but that's
Well,
neither
that's
here.
very frightening.
It
Well,
is
I
very
mean,
frightening.
Yes.
as Arizona is trending blue, perhaps that trend will decrease, and Arizona will become a free for all for sexual deviancy.
Oh man.
we
Oh yeah.
You may be in luck for
Well,
Anyway, I probably derailed the conversation bringing that up, but oh well.
But
that's okay.
so I'm curious, what was the video for the episode with Howling Mutant and Jacob? Because it seems like those guys would lend themselves to like a really interesting promo.
Well, that so I did a couple episodes with Howling Mutant and Jacob, and the most recent
Oh,
one
the
was like
Halloween one
the
was the
Halloween
one.
special.
Yeah.
And this is in the post, like I said, I had that video editor guy helping me, and his name was Matt. And this was post Matt when I did that. And so all I did was I at the mall where I recorded the vast majority of the episodes, the audio is called the Arizona Mills Mall.
Yeah.
And during
Okay.
Halloween season, what used to be the Sears is basically just like an empty, gigantic portion of the mall that they'll use it one for a while. It was like Bouncy House Mania, and there were just bounce houses in there, and they'll do that part of the year, and then they'll have like convention, like like little conventions where people sell stuff like sneakers and stuff like that. Well, during Halloween, it becomes a Spirit Halloween store.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
And so
Cool.
I went into the Spirit Halloween and I took a bunch of video and I slowed it down and put some spooky music over it and some audio from that episode. And that was basically it, real simple, not
Okay.
a,
Yeah. Well, one
yeah.
real like strength of that episode, and I think a lot of the Tales from the Mall episodes, is you are having your friends on, people that not always, but often people you already know. And like that lends itself to like a fun, good conversation. Like for instance, I think on New Right, I mean, we haven't had, I think, people will be upset if I'm wrong here, but I think our only return guest was Kevin Kautzman so far. And I
Right.
think our second episode with him was, a lot more, entertaining than our first, just because we had like that rapport. We have that, kind of friendliness back and forth going. And like, that's like perfect. Like, if you can build a big network of like interesting people and just have them on again and again, like you're gonna get the best conversations, because that conversation between you, Jacob, and Mutant, like you were just like really just shooting the shit, and it was fun, and like like there is that moment where like Mutant, I think, was talking about dressing up as terrorists for Halloween or something, or maybe it was Jacob. I forget who was dressed up as the terror, the Ayatollah or something. But like you guys just like dunking on it and riffing. That was really funny.
Well, I'm glad you think so. And yeah, I mean, I love to have my friends on the show. I love to have Jacob on. He's a really close friend of mine who, I know, like I've been to his house a few times, and um who, by the way, is like one of the most visionary people I've ever met. And Apocalypse Confidential and all of its success is because of his instincts and his vision and getting the right guys,
Awesome. Yeah.
asking the right guys like Max Thrax, who you had on, and all of the guys, Tom Will.
Yeah.
His books editor that we've got, his name is Bill, and he's been on the show and will be on my show. And Hermes Thurston, who's like kind of a, he's like, he knows a lot about Web 3.0. And then we've got this guy, this new guy, Tolly, who's going to do some merch for us, and he's a character, and I've met him. And then Dawson, who's the fiction editor, who's just like a really,
oh yeah, Dawson, I know him.
a savant, and so it's, and I think that's a testament to Jacob, where he's like, he knows who's going to be good,
Yeah. He seems like a real kind of, as you say, visionary, and like someone with a sense of like being a quiet leader. Like he knows how to direct people. He knows how to like pick the best people. Like all of the kind of like qualities that, not to get too political, that we wish Trump had had.
Yeah. Well, I would say that Jacob really is Caesar with the soul of Christ.
Yeah.
High praise. But yeah. Cool.
No,
is that Nietzsche? Is that, I don't know. You guys
I don't know. It sounds like a great concept.
It's a good one.
Yeah. But yeah, no, definitely. I think to kind of pair it with Dan had said, I think both Tales from the Mall and Isolation Chamber. I mean, you talk about obviously Jacob is good as a leader, but also with your pod, Brennan, I would pay you that compliment. Like, it's very much the product of your mind, but you really let bring out the best in your guests and your collaborators, and that's one of the things that's so exciting about your work. And about the Isolation Chamber too. It's like this, the camaraderie of everyone involved was one of the highlights for sure.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. No. In fact, oh, go on. I'm sorry. I don't mean to cut you off.
I think camaraderie is like one of the most important things on earth. When football players retire, the thing that they miss the most usually is the camaraderie. Like they don't have that. They don't have that guys going into battle feeling, and I definitely have that. And we get that with Apocalypse Confidential too.
Yeah. No, listening to Isolation Chamber, I was like impressed both by the execution, the quality, and I'm like, wow, Brendan actually knows like a lot of talented people who like, hook up with him and do work with him. Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Well, that's an incredible feeling to reach out to somebody out of the blue and be like, do you want to do this? And then being like, oh, I would love to. Absolutely. Instead of being like, what's this about? Like, who are you? Like, those kinds of things. And so I love that feeling, I chase that. That's why
Absolutely.
I do what I do.
Thrill of the chase.
Yes.
So another part that we wanted to bring up in Isolation Chamber is, God, I don't know, maybe this will come off as a little too a little too pussy or something. But there's the sense that you like expressed, and I not you necessarily, the character you and Brendan, this desire to be loved the way you want to be loved, which is to say, to be understood by your partner. And I had a kind of like semi-viral tweet that went around saying like women parentheses like I want him to love me for the real me. Men parentheses I hope that she how did I put this?
Yeah.
Under no circumstances can she discover the real me.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's like this real kind of like I feel dichotomy and kind of like sense that like if you're a man, you shouldn't strive to be understood by your partner because that exposes a level of vulnerability that she will then like not respect you for or whatever, or like or maybe there's stuff that's just like kind of like wrong or gross or whatever. But like nevertheless, I think that is a strong instinct. I feel it myself. I'll say like I 100% want to feel understood by my my girl. So like it's it's something that I think guys on our side, whatever that means, the E-Right, the frogs, are just kind of like, that's not part of the equation. Why they don't need to understand you. You just need to, have them and keep them happy and, and do your projects. But like, to me, that's kind of like, not a full relationship, not a full union. What do you think about that, Brendan?
I would have to agree. Well, one of the things that I picked up, I've gone through a lot of different phases of, of what my, deep intellectual influences are, and then also what more superficial atmospheric things that I consider to be true. And, I went through a phase where I was like reading like, fucking Rollo Tomasi or what, that guy.
Yeah. I have
100%.
He's terrible. Yeah. He's terrible. And
Artiste, the godfather of them all.
And these things, like it just, the problem that I have with them is that they're asking you to put on this, like to basically perform this character 24/7. You can't let your guard down with your partner, with women. And it sounds like, well, why even, like, that sounds really stressful. Why even bother?
Yeah, exactly.
Why even bother? And I'm not, and not even 100% that it works. And what kind of person are you attracting who needs like the heavy hand of basically what sounds to me like an alcoholic father, or something like that. The point I'm just making is that a relationship should be somewhere where you feel comfortable and let your guard down, a respite. Like, I mean, I'm not saying like there's a difference between wallowing in self-pity and like, overdoing it with a partner. And I've certainly done that in the past, like where I just like became this pathetic animal. But because you are working, because you're working hard and the waves of society are crashing on you and you're fighting the good fight and you're going and working hard in the world, whether it's like the corporate world or whatever, you need a safe harbor. Like, isn't that the point of a relationship?
Yeah.
And furthermore, there's an idea that you are actually giving. You're giving when you expose yourself. You're sending, you're communicating a message of love when you're being vulnerable by saying like, I trust you.
Yeah.
I care about you enough that I want you to see me how I really am.
I think is especially true of artists, right? Like if you have a light, as we'll get into talking about on the isolation chamber, the concept of light and dark. But if you think you have this light within you, not only do you want to share it with the public, but you especially want to share it with your woman. You want her to see and appreciate that. And like, that's like, if you're kind of this Heartiste version of like, I'm always going to make you think I don't like you. That's like not really going to, she's not going to see your light. She's going to see this kind of like fake image of like kind of masculine domination or whatever that you construct to, you know, kind of maintain relational supremacy.
Yeah.
And like that's something that I think would be hard to maintain consistently, and perhaps, you know, very hurtful for you not just her, but you personally to maintain with consistency for anyone. But I think especially for an artist, because like so much of like, you know, your enjoyment out of life comes from having your thoughts understood.
Yeah.
I agree. I think the real risk that they don't talk about is that when you put your, you know, when you become vulnerable, when you show yourself, you say something, you say what you need or what you want, and that, and it doesn't go well, and you're not getting it, it's not being reciprocated or not being understood. That's a hard moment that
Yeah.
maybe some people just don't want to deal with, you know.
Yeah. Well,
I
that
think,
happens in the isolation chamber, right? With the first performance art.
oh God. Well, that was a bad, like, you know, like I had this idea that it was, you know, I don't know what changed, but just this idea that, you know, that Brendan was kind of a, you know, he wasn't too self-aware, and his ideas were bad, you know.
A little
Yeah.
Spencer-esque in
Yeah,
some
yeah,
respects.
exactly. You know, that definitely that. I think, you know, it's just, you know, when I read stuff like that red pill stuff or whatever, it's just like
Yeah.
asking me to act in ways that are foreign to me, and I don't really want, like, I don't even want to be that guy. Like, if that's the price to have a relationship, a price to be with women, like, I just, like, maybe I don't. First of all, there's 6 billion people on the planet, so you know, for this to encompass, so, you know, and I don't
Yeah.
know,
No, I get what
three
you're saying.
billion of them are women, you know, or whatever.
Yeah.
For this to describe all of them, you know, it's not
Yeah.
possible, probably,
Not
anyway.
possible. Yeah.
And so it's, you know, it might be useful for some guys who can spurgs, you know, guys who just don't have like an intuition about how to, you know, like, here's some guidelines, you know.
Hmm.
But I don't think that they're, I think that they'd be better off reading like the Sleepy Time Bear on Twitter or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
On the
like it
deeper
depends on
yeah.
various like personal aspects and unfortunately like physical and status aspects. But
Yeah.
That's true.
beyond that, you know, it sounds trite or silly, but like oftentimes you're just gonna do better being yourself. And
No,
Mhm.
I
you know,
think
because
that's
that comes with a certain need of confidence. If you're just actually not putting on an act, you're going to be more confident because you're just being you.
That's true.
I think
That's
at the
true.
deeper level of some of those PUA type guys, some of them did understand that to a certain degree, at least. And you know, you mentioned Delicious Tacos being on Tales from the Mall earlier. I haven't heard that episode, but he's kind of a guy who walked the line, the line from, you know, he was kind of part of that PUA scene a little bit. But I think now what, not that he's even an advocate, he's mostly like an auto fiction writer, but nevertheless, he's someone who I think understands that there's more to it than the Heartiste thing, and that there is a value to the vulnerability, even if hopefully some of that vulnerability is counteracted by masculinity as well. Nevertheless, you know.
Well, I think one thing is that, okay, first of all, I'll say this, like that Rolo Tomasi guy or whatever, like, there's something wrong with that guy. Like, okay, like, he's his own guy, like, and he has his own view of the world, and part of his philosophies are projections of whatever's going on. The Heartiste thing seemed to me to come out of a context of like that, like, mid-Atlantic PUA scene, like a Washington D.C.,
Yeah, there was
Yeah.
something going
where it
on.
was like, we live in, you know, like we're just trying to get laid at nightclubs, and we're dealing with women that we don't even really care about, and DC is a cesspool for dating anyway, so this is not a context where we can really explore all of the dimensions of male female relationships. We're just talking about, like, here's a way
specific time and place for
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
And it's good. I mean, not even to get too derailed on PUA stuff, but as
No, it's one of my
get our
favorite topics, by the way.
What's
Oh,
that?
cool.
I'm a
Yeah.
scholar of PUA.
Yeah, no, I
Of
mean, I think
pickup.
Dan and I have both.
Not that I'm good at it, but
Yeah, no, I think a lot
or
of us have
tried it
read
even
that
really.
stuff. Yeah, no, same. We get our second
Yeah,
episode on Marquise, and like I think that some of his
the
writing actually
manosphere
stands
to
up.
literature pipeline.
Yeah, we called it the manosphere to literature pipeline, and I think that a lot of Hart's writing is actually very good, and a lot of his kind of more philosophical or sociological insights are actually pretty sound. And frankly, not that I've tried much, but his game advice is probably sound. But still, it's like, so he's probably better than Tomasi and some of these other guys. But nevertheless, it's like, yeah, as you said, it's kind of a specific time and place, and it's a very negative outlook on things.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's dark. Too dark for me. I like light.
Right. Well, I think we wanted to talk a little more about some of that element of Isolation Chamber, the interplay of dark versus light. Dan, you had a way of putting it, and maybe it's a silly question in a way, but I guess that idea of the artist as the bringer of light, and we've talked about this a bit already, but the artist as the bringer of light really resonates.
Yeah. So yeah, the concept of the light versus darkness, that I thought was a really like ingenious way of kind of like weaving this into the plot and into the story. And it really, it's going to sound trite, or it's going to sound, self-serious, but it resonated with me because this idea that like there are certain individuals with light, and they have these ideas, and they have these, things that if you don't share your light with the world, you'll it'll go cold, and you'll freeze to death or whatever. And it resonated with me on a few levels, because like they're kind of, I've at times, like maybe earlier in my 20s or whatever, kind of felt like I wished I had light, but I wasn't sure. And it's like, you kind of like, you think like, oh, I think I have the makings of someone who has light and can contribute. But then you like kind of sit down to do something, and you're like, well, none of this is any good. I don't know how to organize my thoughts. I don't know how to. But then like it got to a certain point where, like probably around the time where I wrote Nutcracker, where like my thoughts really began to crystallize. I kind of like developed a worldview, and I'm like, well, actually, now I truly can write what I want to write, and I'm ready to really start contributing my light, as it were, to the world. And then it became a matter of like, you got to find the time to do this, even though it hurts, even though it like hurts in terms of like taking time from other things, be it from family, from relationships, from work, from sleep.
Yeah.
Yes. But you just, nevertheless, you have to do it, because like, if you don't, I mean, it's kind of like this kind of weird thing, right? Where it's like, yeah, ultimately kind of like, who cares if you don't share your light? It's like, you're not literally going to freeze to death. But the thing is, it's kind of like, and this gets into a little bit of, religion perhaps, or something. Like, if you feel that you have these thoughts, ideas, qualities that once you die, they'll go away forever. You have a kind of like a God-given duty almost to express them while you're here, to get them out there into the world while you still can. And like, that's why, like, when I was done with Nutcracker, I felt a great sense of relief. I felt a sense of relief that like, okay, you can, not that I want to, but like, if you got hit by a car tomorrow and there were no more damn Baltic, well, you got Nutcracker out, and that will live on. And that's just kind of like, whew, I did it. I still don't have children. Gotta get working on that, but I got Nutcracker out.
Yeah, I agree. I think that it's like would be wrong. It would be selfish if you had any inkling that you had something to say that people needed to hear, that you don't say it. Because that was a big thing for me, was just that, oh, well, everybody has something to say, and everybody's saying something. Everybody's got some project. That's what it feels like, right? because when you're contributing to a space where it's kind of like a community of creative people, well, of course everybody is making something. That's the community that you're in, but it feels like that all 8 billion people on earth are doing that. And so you kind of feel like you don't want to like contribute to the pollution. You almost look
I've
at
had
it
that feeling too.
as like pollution.
I've actually,
Yeah.
when I think I've said this on this pod before, when Dan first said we should start a podcast, I was like, there's too many podcasts. But I'm glad we did it, of course. So I get what you mean. Like, I've had that sense. But I think you're also right that it's maybe a little artificial. We're on a creative sphere of Twitter. And yeah, of course, what else are you going to do? You're just going to post about politics all day? No, you're going to have some kind of project, some kind of podcast, some kind of writing project, probably both. And it's nothing to be dissuaded by. I think I've said this maybe on Astral's podcast or somewhere, but the way to look at it isn't like, oh, there's too much. It's like, you gotta, and actually, you know what, Brennan, I think you talked about this maybe with John Dios or someone who's a musician, how it stuck with me on Tales from the Mall, how it's like, you almost have to look at it, and it's almost a tired metaphor, but still like the punk scene, quote unquote, or like the independent music scene, where it's like, yeah, of course everyone has a band and people open up for each other. And maybe there's only like 100 people in the crowd, but like you're still playing to those people, and you got to embrace that. You got to embrace the multiplicity of it, and you're not going to listen to everything. You got to find your people and stay with them, because everyone is bringing some kind of light into the world, as gay as that may sound.
And the other thing that you have to do is, and it sounds like, Dan, you did this, when you were just what you were just describing. And I heard this from a guy who's an actor, that in order to be good, you have to assume your own brilliance.
Yeah, I think it's true.
There's really no other way, because you need the confidence to say, like if you got something risky that you want to try or whatever, and you're just like, well, I'm not the guy. I'm not that good. So I'm not going to try that.
Yeah.
Well,
No, I think you need to have that bedrock belief, but ironically, while you're writing it, I think you have to let go of that. So like, if I'm writing something and I'm thinking like, this has to be really good, this has to be, live up to my expectations, I'll just get too in my head and I won't be able to write well.
Yeah.
So when I'm writing, I just tell myself, this is probably shit. You're probably going to, just keep only, read it yourself, never share it with anyone. So just like go buck wild. But
that's a good point.
Yeah.
That's like I feel like that's like the flip side. Like, you either say like, this is probably shit anyway, that I got to do it, so it doesn't matter. Or you say, but I feel like the other way of doing that, it's actually, ironically, I think it ends up being a similar thing when you say anything I do is brilliant. It's either way you're getting to that point of saying it doesn't matter.
That's true.
And that's how you let loose.
Yeah, exactly.
So either where you say there's no consequences, or just assume, like, it's just tomato.
Yeah, you have to find a way to convince yourself that it doesn't matter how people are judging you.
Well,
and that's the way you produce good art.
And that's kind of what I had to do with the isolation chamber, because I was like, oh my God, what if it's cringe? Like, what if it's the worst, and like everybody thinks it sucks, or even worse than that, nobody clicks on it. Nobody clicks on it, like, and it just goes out, and you're just like one of those people who's just like, sometimes there's those people who like have 0 followers on Twitter, and they'll post like, it'll just be like, hey, here's my podcast, and it's like a SoundCloud link, and it's like there's not even like an image or anything, and it gets 0 likes or whatever, and you're just kind of imagining yourself as that person, and it's a horrible thing. And I was like, that I would have to do that. I would go through that phase, and then I would go through the phase. Don't worry about it. This isn't for that reason. It's just for you to get it out. That's the forge. That's the real work, is getting it out. Eric told me, he said, that's when I was working with Eric, what people think of it is none of your business. Okay. Your business is move on to the next thing. So I was okay. So I'd go to work with that attitude. Like, nobody's going to listen to it anyway. Doesn't matter. And then I'd do it. And then it would be like, this is the best fucking thing that has ever been written. And I'm going to be, Amazon is going to approach me and say, we want you to develop a Prime series. and you're going to get everybody's going to think you're great. Everybody's going to think it's genius because it is genius, because I'm totally relaxed and I'm making something genius out of that state. And then I would get hyped up, and then it would come back to me like, but what if nobody gets it and nobody likes it, and it sucks and it's actually cringe as fuck, and then I would go, okay, just do it. Nobody cares. And it was that cycle over and over and over again,
Yeah, no, I'm familiar with that cycle as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's a weird thing. Obviously, you do want an audience, but you can't think about that while you're making
those people who say I don't care if anybody reads it. I don't care if I'm doing it for myself. They are, and maybe they're lying to themselves for good reason, for reasons that we've illuminated that they need to, but they are 100% lying, that they're full of shit.
You do it
absolutely,
for audience, but you also can't do it for audience. It's another one of those sort of, not contradictory, but like one of those tensions that creates art, I think. To
a sort of double think.
Yeah, double think. For a contemporary contemporary literature soundbite reference here, Bret Easton Ellis's last book, The Shards, he dedicated to no one, and has kind of like he wrote like, this is dedicated to no one, and he has kind of talked about it in his podcast as like basically what we're talking about, that you can't all literature, and he's obviously a very celebrated author, but says like you cannot write, or he does not write for anyone else. It's just a process of letting something out, and it has to be that way. That's the only way you can create. And I've always liked that, like not that I'm like, I started to realize I'm not saying I'm the best writer in the world, but doing something right with regard to writing, and even doing something right with regard to podcasting and other forms of creativity when I started to think similarly like that, because I'd heard people like Brett and others say like, it has to be for you. You can't worry what anyone else thinks. It has to be something that you're letting out of yourself, that you feel you need to let out, which again, it's kind of the story of the isolation chamber. Some light you need to share, or perhaps even some darkness you need to exercise and turn into light, perhaps. Once I started thinking that way about what I was doing, that's how I knew not necessarily to speak to its quality, but that I was doing it right, I guess. Because as a teenager trying to write, it's like, what do I even do beyond putting words on a page? Like, how do I know if I'm doing it right? And I think once I started to think like that, that's when I realized, okay, this is what art is. It's this exclamation of something from inside of you, where you would do it. I mean, I think you're right that I think people who say like, I don't care if people read my work, I do think they're probably lying. But I think there is something to be said for like, I would do it even if I knew no one would read it. Which
interesting.
Maybe that's kind of masochistic and stupid in of itself, but I actually do think that's true for me. Like, I would do a lot of the creative stuff I do, whether or not there was ever an audience, because I feel I need to. But yeah.
Interesting. I would definitely do I would do visual art if I didn't think anybody would look at it.
Yeah, I guess podcast. I wouldn't You're right.
I don't know if I would do the writing, because that it's really hard.
Yeah.
But I had this artist on Tales from the Mall. Her name is Petra Courtwright.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a really talented visual artist, and really her work is really extraordinary. And we were talking about some of the barriers to starting, to doing the work. That's something that people say all the time. Do the work. It's kind of gay. But anyway, she said, well, if I don't feel like working, or if I'm feeling a lot of resistance, I'll just say, this is a practice. I'm just practicing on this one.
Yeah.
Dude, that is golden. That is golden advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I mean when I'm just like, no one has to see it. No one has to. Like, you're just, you never give up a bedrock belief that like you're contributing valuable things, but you know that you're not going to get it right every time. And like, so not every time you put your pen to page means it's going to be golden. You just need to, kind of trust that you'll eventually produce good stuff. And you just got to, get it out there, and know that like you're going to do your best stuff when no one is watching. So
yeah,
when you're not watching yourself, rather.
Yeah. And that's really even more important, because you got to go unconscious.
Yeah.
You got to go unconscious, and that's when the good feelings as well as the good shit comes out on the page, but also the good feeling of like, this isn't coming from me.
Well, it goes back to the original metaphor you spoke about, which is, the isolation chamber as that state of mind, not necessarily a literal suspension tank, but some kind of, and with meditation too, like some kind of focus honed in on the pure power of creativity, the light.
Yeah.
Which it's a powerful idea that I think really comes across in Isolation Chamber. Obviously, like I really do think it's very profound. Obviously there's an element of comedy to the Isolation Chamber. There's something very unassuming about a lot of your work, but it goes deep very fast, I find. And I think the philosophical content that we're now talking about in terms of being a creative person in art, I think is some very profound stuff.
Thank you. Well, okay, so one other thing about the light, and I think this is kind of comes to it really, I begin to elucidate this from episode 6 onward, and 6 is kind of a turning point. And what happens in episode 6 is Brendan has had his first performance, and it's just trashed on NPR by like a Latinx NPR art reviewer. And he's completely devastated. But then this like really attractive art journalist shows up at his house, and she's like really into the work. She's really into him, and she says, let's take you to the isolation chamber, and you should go in, and I've also got this pill that you should take. And he takes the pill, and he has this just like absolutely like nightmare experience, in which he meets this incest pornographer. And then this kid starts telling him about going down to the basement where he's actually killed, where he's actually like killed himself. And then he meets this woman who he thinks is this little girl who he thinks is his sister, but then she reveals she's actually his aborted daughter.
Right.
And the whole thing is just like super traumatic.
One of the best episodes in the series.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Brendan Here's a Who, right? Go on.
Yeah, Brendan Here's a Who, right. Yeah. And so from then on, we find out that there's this conspiracy against Brendan from these people that have embraced darkness. And this comes from an idea that if you have light, and I'm not just talking about this idea that you might be a creative person, but if you're somebody who believes in, who just wants to spread goodwill, good cheer, love, that there are a multitude of forces that will try and bring you down, and in just atmospherically, but also in fact. I think that negative people see people who are, who are trying to stay above ground, and they try and bring them down. They try and interrupt what's happening, and you can sometimes attract those people into your life. And I think that's kind of where the conspiracy of darkness originated from.
That was fascinating. Yeah, I think it's not. Yeah, I mean, as you kind of allude to in the show, not everyone is purely dark or light, and sometimes the darkness might just be distraction. Perhaps maybe it's not someone who's truly evil or dark at core. But I mean, it's something I think a lot about too. It's again, not to pimp my own book that's not even released yet, but
pimp it, baby. This is your podcast.
I guess
you got books to sell.
Pimp it back.
But I was saying this to Dan, and we'll talk about Nutcracker in a second too. So we'll do some more pimping. But my new book is called The Black Album, and it's kind of there's this central alchemical. It's a collection of short stories and essays, but they're all kind of around what I would call like a central sort of alchemical theme about a fairly basic notion within art, but a sort of alchemically tinged notion about like converting dark energy into light, and also kind of get obsessive at parts about like just how hard it is to be a creative person. You mentioned like kind of people who try to bring you down, but then I just also think with working a full-time job, with the other various demands, the other shit of life, kind of pulling you down. That's another tension that I'm like trying to work through in that. And I think from a slightly different angle, I think Isolation Chamber talks about that stuff. And I wasn't really, because I'm writing this book and I'm listening to your to the radio drama at the same time. And it kind of wasn't until last night when I was talking through Dan about our outline that I was like, oh wow, actually the sort of philosophic similarity between this dark and light interplay is actually very, very similar to what I'm trying to work on as well.
Right. Well, yeah. Well, and this is the thing about being somebody who tries to accomplish something in an unconventional way, and that's what artists are unconventional people. They live unconventional lives, and they try and they take risks and they put themselves out there. And people close to you, when you try to do that, will have a number of reactions, and I think that some people that won't understand it, and they'll be afraid for you. They'll be afraid for you. People who love you will be afraid for you. They'll afraid that you'll fail, that you will hurt yourself in some way. And then there are other people who have ambitions, but too afraid to act on them for good reason. Okay. And I honestly believe that most people are doing their best. So if I say something unflattering about other people or whatever, don't get me wrong. Like, people are doing their best. A lot of people have pent up ambitions, pent up light that they don't use.
Perhaps
and when they see other people using it, they start to project. They start to they're triggered.
Yeah.
And so I think that when somebody embarks on this path, that they're going to trigger people in their lives in one of those two ways. Either they're going to scare them, they're going to be afraid for them, or it's going to trigger their own pent up ambition that they're not using, and they're going to be confused. I'm not saying that they'll be jealous, but that their own unused light will start expressing itself in dark ways.
Definitely. And people like to have their own sort of decisions and existential decisions validated. So when there's someone who made an opposite decision, it can be very triggering.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's easy to and for some people, they succumb to the temptation to then dismiss.
Yeah.
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 That's profound stuff.
People don't like to see other people succeed when they fear that those people are exercising avenues that they themselves had or have the ability to access but choose not to.
Yes, that's true.
And again, as you said, Brennan, everyone's doing their best. It's in a money-driven world.
Late capitalism.
Not even get political about it. It's just it is actually like a possibly stupid decision, and especially when you're dealing with controversial corners of Twitter, for instance. Which obviously we have knowledge of. Like you always are like putting yourself a little bit at risk to things that could fuck with like your life. But it's worth it.
I hope so. I quit a job. I quit a very high paying job, to work on projects full time, and everybody thought I was insane.
Dude,
and
I haven't even taken that leap. But
and my financial situation,
I won't let. I'll just. I admire that, is what I'm trying to say. I'm not going to be like, oh, that was silly. No, I think that's great, and I haven't.
Well, I mean, it was a little premature. It was a little premature. I mean,
sometimes it's got to be done. Yeah.
My financial situation is not good.
Subscribe to Tales from the Mall.
I have a job now. Yeah. I have a job now that's not as good as the one I had. It doesn't pay as well. Gives me a lot more. It's way less stressful. And like I said, I mean, you have to make unconventional choices and live an unconventional life sometimes. I'm not saying that that's not a requirement of this vocation. It's not a requirement. In fact, if you can balance it, then you're better off.
Yeah.
I had trouble with that.
It's true, though. Stressful jobs, they take it out of you. Just last night, I was talking with Matt how right after COVID, my sector of the legal industry kind of ground to a halt. I had a lot of free time. So I was spending 2 to 3 hours a day writing Nutcracker, and I wrote it in about five
Dream. Yeah.
months. And as my industry began to pick up, as COVID lifted, the first full week that was like a real, full work week again, I was like, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
Because,
I
yeah,
had the same
suddenly I
experience.
lost the kind of the life that I feel like, best maximized my abilities and talent and I felt in harmony with, which was like writing 2 or 3 hours a day, going on long walks and like making healthy dinners and watching movies. And like, that is not something that you can really maintain while having being
Yeah.
a lawyer or whatever you are.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And like, so now like I have to choose. It's like, well, you're gonna kind of carve out maybe a little bit of time in the morning to write. You're gonna have to, you can't do this that weekend because you want to write, you want to do this or that, you want to keep a podcast going. You have to make all sorts of choices, and it becomes a situation where you're robbing Peter to pay Paul.
That's true. That is true. So but you had the opportunity to write your book, with some downtime.
Absolutely. Would have been
Nice.
very difficult to do without downtime,
Yeah.
I
And how
must
did you
unfortunately say.
so I mean, you, by the way, you use this like the like kind of the picaresque vernacular, the picaresque prose style, like
Oh yeah.
through
Yeah,
the entire
it's
book.
modeled somewhat on a Confederacy of Dunces.
I see. And did you and so what, that was something that you knew when you started you were going to do?
No, I so it's very interesting because like I kind of wrote and wrote until I found Spencer's voice and then kind of let him, like I had vague ideas of where I wanted the plot to go, but nothing too concrete. And I let Spencer take me where where he wanted to go. And so after finishing it, I read I don't read the New Yorker often these days because there's not much good in it. But there was an interesting article about Ignatius J. Riley, the main character of A Confederacy of Dunces, and how he was a sort of proto edge lord. And so that kind of reawakened my interest in the novel, which I read a while ago. And so I picked it up again and I started reading it. And I realized, holy shit, Spencer is just like Ignatius. My prose style is somewhat similar to that of John Kennedy Toole's, and indeed the thematic content is somewhat similar as well. So I like to think of it as a kind of spiritual heir to A Confederacy of Dunces. I've done an episode of Art of Darkness with Brad and Kelly on Brad Kelly and Kevin
Yeah.
Katzman on John Kennedy Toole, and to an extent, Nutcracker's relationship to A Confederacy of Dunces. Yeah, that was a pod episode of Art of Darkness. And we've done an episode of New Right called On the Consolation of Podcasting, one of our favorites, which is about A Confederacy of Dunces and Nutcracker and outsiders writing literature. And Toole was an outsider par excellence. The guy, he effing killed himself. So
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. Well, it's really like amazing that it hits and keeps on hitting with like the humorous lines. And I
Thank
mean,
you.
just like some of the choices that you made, like I'm trying to think. There was one where I don't know, like just even like little things, like when he chooses to call red wine, he calls it vino or whatever. It's really but
Alcoholic
yeah,
vino.
yeah, alcoholic vino. That was one of my favorite parts.
like there's unalcoholic vino.
Exactly. It was yeah, it was good. It was really good. And so what an accomplishment.
Thank you, man.
Um
I'm happy you enjoyed it.
I would like to write a book, but I don't know. Maybe this year, maybe not.
Yeah, no, well,
I bet you have it in you.
that's
You
yours,
I
yeah.
mean, the Isolation Chamber was awesome, and
Thank
like
you.
the humor, like I was laughing out loud at the beginning where like the one of the voices. I forget which one exactly, but was calling you a pig man, and you're like, I'm not a pig, I'm a man.
Yeah.
And like that refrain was just so hilarious.
Yeah.
And like a lot of like mutants, like goon moments, like I'm gonna stick my hand up your ass and stuff. It's very, very mutant.
Well, I'm glad you liked it. I hope that people will listen to it. It's out there. It's on, it's on Apple and Spotify. You just type in The Isolation Chamber. So
That's right.
Yeah, no.
Amazing episode art too. Like you type it in, and there is like Brendan looking like he's about to go into an isolation chamber.
Yeah.
A little nervous, maybe.
Yeah. Look at
Yeah, that was art that I commissioned from a really talented guy named Sam Spano, who was
and he was on the pod as well. He was on,
and he did voices on the pod. So, and he was on Tales from the Mall a couple times. So he's a good guy. I like him. Yeah,
definitely. I
listened to your guys' episode about Entourage.
Yes,
thank you.
And that was you guys characterized it properly. It's not, well, first of all, I do my last watch of it, it struck me that the comedy writing is actually really, really good. It's a great comedy.
It's well written and well structured. Yeah.
I didn't think of it as a comedy when I first watched it. I really didn't. I thought, wow, this is like really an interesting slice of life
going on in LA.
Yeah. And I mean, of course, I was laughing at like Ari in particular the first time, but now the true comic genius of the show is drama. Drama.
For sure.
And you know what? I just saw. I live right by this comedy club called the Tempe Improv, and in April, I guess, as it turns out, the guy who created the show and Kevin Connolly and Kevin Dillon do a podcast called the Victory Podcast, and they're going to be doing it live at the Tempe Improv, and I think I might actually go.
Yeah, I would.
You should definitely do that, and like make it a Tales from the Mall episode.
That would be cool. I would love to meet. In particular, I would love to meet Kevin Dillon. My favorite moment in the whole show is when Aquaman has just come out. They go and see it at some multiplex in the valley instead of like, I don't know what, I can't remember their rationale. Like just kind
power
of get
outage, I believe. Yeah.
Well, the power does go out while they're seeing the film because there's like rolling blackouts. But while they're in the theater, and Drama's like, he's being dramatic and like wearing a towel over his head because it's so hot in the valley or whatever. And some guy gets up at the end of their row and has to use the bathroom and is walking down the line past Turtle, past Vincent or whatever. And he gets to Drama, and Drama's just sitting there with the towel draped over him like he's got a hood, like an Emperor Palpatine hood. And he goes, "Hold it." And the guy sits back down. But
that's pretty funny.
That's a great episode. I also remember because I live in Southern California. I know exactly where that theater was. I believe it shut down during the pandemic.
Did you grow up in the valley?
I certainly did, and I grew up on the East Coast. But I've been here like 5 years, and it's kind of gotten under my skin where like I can effectively pretend to be local if I want.
I see.
and because I live in the valley as opposed to like West Hollywood or something.
Yeah. My
like,
family's from Northern California.
Right, I knew that from your pod. I remember that episode where you talked. No, I'm not even going to get into it, but maybe a little teaser for Tales from the Mall. That story about like trying to find your aunt's house to piss or whatever. And
and I pissed my pants. Yeah.
Anyway,
that was I thought I would when that happened. I thought that I could never tell a soul that it happened.
Yeah,
that it was the worst.
Like, that was your rock bottom, right?
Yeah, that it was the lowest moment of my life, and now I tell anybody that'll listen. But
so the story is basically that you pulled off the freeway and you're just trying to remember where your aunt's.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm just reiterating it now, but yeah, it's pretty damn funny.
Well, yeah, it just got to the point where I couldn't make any decisions because I just had to pee so badly. So
I've been like halfway there myself. Honestly, I know I can understand how it can happen.
You get so drunk that you almost forget to take your pants off. That has happened to me once or twice where I'm just like, oh shit, I gotta pull my pants down or I'm gonna piss in them.
Just want to say on this though that this I usually don't like to promote podcasts outside of our podcast sphere, but this Entourage podcast looks incredible. It's basically, yeah, as you said, it's Doug Ellen, who's the creator, Kevin Dillon, and what's his name? No, yeah, Doug Ellen and Kevin Dillon. And I guess maybe Kevin Connolly's coming on too. But they just talk about each episode. I'm gonna have to listen. They seem like smart guys. They seem like they know that there's a hunger for this kind of revisit, like this type of podcast that kind of revisits cultural
the golden age of white boy summer, Matt.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, you were describing, Dan, that you were watching it at the college dorm at
during the golden age of white boy summer.
Yeah. That was me too. I think we're probably right around the same age.
Oh yeah. No, I remember like after nights out of like striking out and not getting laid, going back with my bros and we'd watch Entourage. Yeah. And it was like kind of like, oh well, if you're not getting pussy, it's pretty good.
Yeah, on DVD.
On DVD, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a good show.
It's
iconic of an era.
And I love and I mean they do a great job with cameos from people that are well known. James Cameron's on there, but people that are like kind of like only like true film nerds and TV nerds would know. Like they have this guy that I'm obsessed with on there who actually directs the show that Johnny Drama's on, Five Towns, I believe it's called. Edward Burns.
Yeah, right.
Oh yeah, I know.
Yeah, Edward Burns. He's on there, and Ralph Macchio's on there.
Yep. There's an interesting Kanye cameo. I remember.
Oh,
too. Yeah,
I don't
like
remember
at
that.
the end of he like flies them, but it's like holy shit.
Oh yeah,
it's like from the graduation era.
I see.
The cameos are. I mean, there's a lot of shows that have kind of stupid cameos where it's like, oh, okay, I see what you did. With Entourage, it's so organic to where they are that I mean, it just encapsulates the era so well. I think the point we were trying to make. There's a lot of people who like found the show very annoying at the time because a lot of them are douchebags, and like no doubt. Yeah. But I think it's aged probably well. Like I wasn't watching it when it came out, but I could see even someone who may have not liked it then. I mean, I think that it really has something to offer.
Well, now. I think that people are more open to the way that they're behaving because people aren't going to act that way now.
Exactly.
Where you don't have to deal with these fucking Bobby bottle service guys, at the Ed Hardy crew, like they don't exist anymore, and so we got a little critical distance on it. I definitely feel that way. I don't think I would like thrive in hanging out with Vinny Chase and his crew, really.
No, me neither.
But they do give you a little bit of, they are a little bit of they can act as totems of. I'm definitely a Johnny Drama myself. I don't know about you guys.
Like how you be in Sex and the City Girls or whatever. You can yourself to someone.
Well, what else you got? I know we've been going for like 2 hours.
Yeah, a couple hours. We could probably go a little. I think I have another one.
How about we talk about bring it home a little bit with Tales from the Mall? What is the next step there? Because I noticed you go online, they except for the Halloween episode, most of them are paywalled now. So I think like probably the plan going forward is like, got pay to play, but you should pay to play because it's a good series.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you got to pay to play, and that's not my feeling was that I didn't want to make any of them pay to play. Like, in fact, by the at the end of last year, I was making them all free for a month until I paywalled them. I didn't do any episodes that were because I thought it's too important for people not to hear. Okay.
Yeah.
That was my thought, was that I need everybody to be able to hear it if they want to, and they should want to, because what it is it's an atmosphere. It's a completely just like open atmosphere to hear the personalities of people that you've always wondered about, people that you never heard of. And it's very like life affirming stuff.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, I think it was it's a little more stressful when you feel like you're kind of in competition with all these other podcasts that are out there, and you're trying to get as many people to listen as possible, and you want all this juice, and you're thinking about guests of who's got the juice, and I think there's a place for that. I just didn't. I was getting too stressed out about it, and now it's like, well, I had a lot of people already paying to subscribe, and I thought those people should be rewarded with the content, and they want to hear it. They're the ones that really want to hear it anyway, and so it's focused my thinking. I do it once a week now instead of twice a week. That was a lot.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that I'm not contemplating who the best guests would be. I mean, we've had some amazing guests really recently. Like I said, Martina Martinez, Tom Will, this guy, Bill, who is the books editor for Apocalypse Confidential. We did an in-person episode at the St. Louis Galleria in
Sweet.
Petra Courtwright, who's a great artist. This woman, Amanda Fortini, who's written a lot about the Las Vegas shooting. She writes about Las Vegas. She writes for the New Yorker, the New York Times, various publications. Really interesting lady. And so it's going to be a balance between people that I'm close to, that you might be familiar with if you hang out a lot on Twitter, and then maybe some new voices who are up to art, writing, that kind of thing. But if you subscribe, good, you will be rewarded, because I keep the content flowing, and I just did a piece of writing actually for my Patreon that I did for free. That's about the Fashion Square Mall in Scottsdale, Arizona. That I also recorded the piece as well, so you can listen to it, you can read it, and I'm going to do more stuff like that as well. So
you gotta have a little bit of free stuff to get people in, and then do you want to speak to what are the like tiers of subscription? Or
there's really only two. There's the $5 a month, which basically that just gets you access to the new episodes, plus, like I said, like 90 some episodes archived on the with a wide range of people that you may be familiar with, like I said, Delicious Tacos, but also Barrett from Contain, Jack the Perfume Nationalist, all kinds of crazy people, crazy characters, and then there's a $20 a month level, which really exists if you just really want to pay my rent and you really love me, and I can't see why you wouldn't. But with that, you get some, I'll mail you some free artwork that I've done, because I'm also a visual artist. So
you do some good artwork, by the way. I think I just retweeted something this morning.
Thank you.
Sweet.
I retweeted the Pat Riley picture.
I'm working on Pat Riley right now, and I'm going to give these pieces away to Jacob, to Blower Guys, because the Pat Riley memes flow heavily in the Apocalypse Confidential chat.
He's a memeable guy for sure.
So who is up next on Tales from the Mall?
Well, it depends on when this comes out, because on Monday is going to be Amanda Fortini.
Nice.
Gotcha.
And then the following, because I'm doing them every Monday, so then the following Monday will be Bill, the books editor. That will be the in-person episode that we did at the St. Louis Galleria. So Tales from the Mall on the road, which I want to do more of that.
Yeah, I was going to say, not to, again, pimp myself out to you in this case, but if and when you're in SoCal again, let's do it.
That would be great.
I don't assume, that you mentioned like who has the juice. I don't know if I have the juice, but but I would love to, all I'm saying is I'd be more than willing to do a Tales from the Mall here.
That's what
at some point.
We could
you guys got the
do
juice,
the new right episode.
You guys got
both of us.
Juice.
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna do you each individually. That's how I.
That's fine too. A little more individual, right? Yeah.
That Halloween special, that was. I'd done another special with Blauergeist and Mutant, but usually it's a one-on-one. I really like to sink my teeth in, with the one-on-one.
That works too.
And then there's going to be one following the one with Bill, with my friend Robbie, who's been on the show a number of times, and he's rebranded himself as Stern Fan Robbie. And I'm going to get his. We're going to do a deep dive into the Howard Stern.
Oh, Howard Stern. Okay, I don't know. NBA is on the brain, but yeah.
Well, we could also talk about David Stern, probably. And see.
Are you a Suns fan? I was going to ask this.
Well, I'm more inclined to be a Suns fan now.
That
they got
Durant,
KD, but my parents are Warriors fans, and I kind of went along with that for a while. I'm not that crazy about the Warriors. It was not a big thing growing up because they sucked.
Yeah, right.
My first professional sports experience was at Arco Arena, where I saw the Kings, because I was born in Sacramento. And so I liked the Kings a lot, and I liked them even better when they were they were really fucking good and they were playing the Lakers, unfortunately,
I'm very familiar with this. We might, when we do a Tales from the Mall, maybe we should go more in depth, because I actually have thoughts and feelings on this. The greatest tragedy in sports history.
Yes. So
2001, was it?
I believe so. Yeah. And I mean, those teams were great. I mean, the players but I haven't followed the Kings in a long time. I tried to get back into them. They really sucked.
They're better now. Yeah.
They had at one point they had DeMarcus Cousins but that was now I mean, we're talking about 10, 12 years ago. So I don't follow the NBA that closely. I'm more of a football person.
But yeah, I mean, we can talk more about the Kings on a few. I don't want to derail. I have to go before too long, but yeah, they're an interesting franchise for sure. And I don't follow the NBA super closely, but I was thinking about becoming initiated into becoming a Kings fan, because I live in LA, but I'm not going to support the Lakers, so we got to support the California team. But they've always been interesting, with that famous case where there's for listeners who don't know, which is probably a lot of our listeners, I don't think we have a ton of sports fans.
Sports ball.
There's just a famous case where basically it's not even a conspiracy theory. There was a rigged NBA conference finals where the Lakers were maybe some people contest this, but basically where the referees handed a conference title to the Lakers over the Kings.
Oh wow. I haven't even heard of that. That's crazy.
Well, Kings are the ultimate small market team in the NBA.
Sacramento.
Who gives a shit?
Yeah. But anyway,
maybe
go on. Dan, sorry.
Well, is there maybe a conservative liberal divide there? Because Sacramento, I think of being a more conservative area in California, to the extent California has them, which I believe is actually to a significant extent.
Yeah. I definitely Central Valley. Yeah.
Well, it's California used to be it was thought of as kind of the intellectual headquarters of modern conservatism.
Yeah, well, I mean, you still have the Claremont Institute.
And Reagan and Nixon
from Orange County.
Yeah.
Nixon really is the only California president we've ever had. I mean, Reagan was from the Midwest,
Yeah. No, 100%.
I talk about this a lot on my show.
Nixon.
I've heard you talk about this.
I like Nixon.
Oh, I do too.
Same. I think
I'm a big Nixon fan.
Yeah. But to bring it back to what we were talking about, we'll probably post this about on later this week, basically, Thursday, Friday. So the Fortini episode should be out, and the Bill, what was it? Bill, the fiction editor? No, Bill.
Bill. Yeah, Will Waltz. He's on Twitter. Bill, and he's our books editor.
Yeah, Bill the books editor.
And I just visited him. I just visited him in St. Louis. Yeah. I happen to have lived there for a few years myself.
Oh wow!
And so we tore it up. We went all over the place, but we did an in-person episode at a mall, St. Louis Galleria.
Nice.
And we talk about all sorts of things. We talk about, a lot of, what the artistic process, the role of an editor, in editing fiction and writing. We talk about Apocalypse Confidential. We talk about David Cronenberg. It's a great episode. So people should subscribe. They can listen to the Amanda Fortini episode, a brilliant woman who it's a 3-hour episode. And then they'll be subscribed. They can go back and listen to the entire archive, and then they can be ready for when the in-person Bill episode drops.
Absolutely. Everyone should subscribe to Tales from the Mall, because there's just an incredible backlog of amazing episodes with guests who are, interesting and often hilarious people. Martina, amazing actress and personality. Mutant, just like, what more can you say about Howling Mutant that he hasn't said many times?
There are I believe there are 4 different episodes on which Mutant appears.
Very cool.
He's tied with the most frequent. Him and Jacob are on there 4 times, 4 different times, both together and separate.
Yeah. No, I mean, there are pods that you listen to just to stay abreast of whatever's going on, and then there are pods that you enjoy, and I enjoy Tales from the Mall. It's fun to listen to, and everyone should subscribe.
Yeah.
Thank you guys.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could probably have gone another whole hour. I feel like there's so many topics we could delve into, but I gotta bounce in a second here. But we should have you back on, or I guess we will maybe do some pods with you, hopefully, for Tales from the Mall, and let's continue talking about some of this stuff because really enjoyed having you on, Brennan.
Thank you. This is a great pleasure. I admire you guys both, and I'm a big fan of the show. So keep doing it.
Thanks. We'll do. Thank you for coming on, Brennan.
My pleasure.
All right.
Stop recording here.